Ah, hello. It's me, Tim. Coming to you this month from my home. I usually, for these intros, try to do them in places of outstanding natural beauty or spiritual significance. But this month, for reasons which I'll explain shortly, I haven't had a huge amount of time. So I'm just filming this from a place which actually is very beautiful to me and has some spiritual significance to me, which is just a little patch of land down the road from my house, which seems to be a pretty well-kept secret. It's grown nice and wild and it doesn't really lead anywhere, but it's a 2-minute walk from my front door, and there's lovely birds and squirrels and nice things, which during the past year, during lockdown, was a real little refuge for me. I used to come and sit here and find a bench to sit and be quiet on and listen to the birds and watch the squirrels and find myself feeling a little bit more peaceful than I did before. So even though there's no historic chapel or whatever great beautiful things for me to show you, it's a place which is meaningful and also happens to fit in with quite a tight time schedule this month. My guest for this episode is another one of my colleagues. This is, I think, probably the last in my series of conversations with work colleagues. Although who knows, I might bump into somebody tomorrow at work and decide that they would be a good podcast guest. But Dan isn't just a work colleague, he's also a really great friend. Somebody who I've met through this kind of odd social experience that we've all been going through this past year. Never met him in real life. He lives in the county of Nottinghamshire, which is where Robin Hood is from, amongst others. And I live in the county of Essex, and those two counties are separated by time and space. So we've never actually hung out in real life, but we hang out a lot virtually, both for work and just for fun, to catch up. And he's somebody who I love very much, and I think you too will love him after this episode. I'm not going to say too much because the interview speaks for itself. It's not an interview, it's a conversation. The conversation speaks for itself. But what I will say is that this is one of my favorite episodes of the podcast. I think we talk. So this is something we talk about in the conversation. I asked Dan to be on the podcast because June, which is the month that I'm recording this in, even though it comes out on the 1st of July, is Pride Month. Certainly here in the UK, I don't know about the rest of the world. And Dan actually suggested to me that it would be good to get somebody, in his words, out and proud, to be on the show. And I'm very lucky that I know lots of people who are out and proud. My life has been blessed with lots of LGBTQIA plus friends, but Dan is something really special, and so when he made that suggestion, I thought I couldn't do much better than asking him to be on the show. And I think you'll agree, he speaks very movingly, with great humour, but also in a way which is well moving and at times hard to hear, particularly for somebody like me who comes from the background of organised religion. Dan talks a bit about his experiences of homophobia, and I must admit I felt almost surprised by some of his stories, because Dan is a gay man who is married, has been for a long time, And I just thought that broadly, as a society, we were kind of cool with that now. I know that there's still all sorts of issues of prejudice to deal with as a society around transphobia and around sexualities and gender identities which people find odd or scary or different. But I thought that a man loving another man was fairly well accepted now. And like I say, I was blown away by some of Dan's experiences and stories which he shares in this. So yeah, I mean, I'll let it talk for itself, the conversation, because I think, like I say, I think it's a really good one, and Dan expresses this all much better than I can. But it's a good one, and like I say, it's one of my favourite that I've done. Yeah, Dan's great. So we'll get onto that in just a second. A little bit of news. I am changing job. I, as most of you know, have been working in the field of digital mental health support, a really important field, and a field which I think helps people and makes a difference. But I am going to leave that to be a hospital chaplain, something which I am really nervous about. It's going to be a new, quite scary experience. I'll have to deal with stuff that I haven't had to deal with before. But, you know, there are challenges, things in life which are challenging and stressful and scary that you also don't give a shit about. And then there are things in life which are challenging and stressful and scary that you do care about, and challenges that you want to rise to, and scary things that you want to face and learn to be good at. And the type of challenges that are going to come my way as a hospital chaplain are things which I don't know how I'll prepare for, and maybe in some ways I can't prepare for them. But they're the kind of things that I want to be good at, you know? They're the type of things that matter to me, that are at the core of who I am, and supporting people through, you know, the hardest points in life, and being a friend to people when they need it, is something which I think is world changing, and that I want to be good at and want to do with people. So that's really exciting. So next month, not next month. I've got to work my notice. So let's say in a couple of months, this podcast will be presented by Tim Leeson, hospital chaplain, as opposed to Tim Leeson, online mental health support participation worker. Hospital chaplain trips off the tongue slightly better. So that's super exciting. I've got some nerves about going back into faith-based work. As you know from the conversations, if you've been listening to the podcast, I loved a lot of my time working in the church, and there's also stuff working for the church which wasn't good for me, and which, having left that scene for the past 2 years, I've been able to work through and sort out and grow, and it's been good for me to leave that scene for a while. And yeah, look, I'm not gonna go on too much about this because you want to get to the conversation with Dan rather than hearing me talk about this. But it's something which I'm cautious about, and you will hear me talk more about in the coming episodes, I'm sure. One other bit of news is after kind of pretty tricky couple of weeks with my dad being pretty seriously unwell for a while. He's okay now, thanks for asking. And some difficult family stuff to deal with. I got a call from my mum, I guess now 10 days ago or so, to let me know that my Opa had died. Opa is the German word for granddad. So my German granddad, my mum's dad, passed away a couple of weeks ago. And it's a weird kind of bereavement because, you know, for all of my life, as far as I can remember, this isn't true of the first couple of years of my life, but everything that I can remember, I've never lived in the same country as Orpa. and I've seen him maybe once a year if I was lucky. So it's not like, people who are lucky enough, blessed enough to have grandparents who they see every weekend, who live down the road from them. It's a different kind of grief to that. I'm not losing something which is a kind of regular, prominent feature of my life, but I am losing someone, or I have lost someone, who was a huge cheerleader of me, who supported me at times financially, but more importantly, supported me with kind of encouragement and interest and care. He was particularly interested in my stuff about religion, and we shared that. He read a lot about theology and faith and that kind of thing, and he loved the fact that I was kind of interested in academic kind of research and studies. He loved the fact that I got a doctorate. He was super proud of me. He came to, not my doctoral graduation because that was during COVID and he was already too unwell, even if it wasn't in COVID, but he came to my master's graduation, traveled from Germany to be with me for that. A graduation which I wouldn't probably have bothered going to if it wasn't for the fact that it would have made him proud to be there and to see me in all of my robes. So I'm going to stop talking in just a moment, but I want to, this is such a minor thing, it feels almost trivial, but I do want to dedicate this episode of the podcast to Orpa, to his memory. I think he'd have probably found a lot of the conversation with Dan quite challenging. He was pretty old school, but he loved the questions and the asking, the philosophy and the pursuit of knowledge, and well, I know that he was proud of me, and I am proud to have had him as my Orpa. So this is for him, whatever reality existence looks like. Who knows, beyond the, past that, past death. But whatever it looks like, if he's still around somewhere, if he's conscious in any way, I love you and I miss you. Okay, on with the show. Little heads up, this conversation with Dan is a sweary conversation, and right from the beginning, includes some category C level swear words. So if you're not up for that, maybe just fast forward the first 5 minutes or so. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and I'll see you on the other side.
Are we non-sweary?
No, you can swear as much as you like. Check this out. Cobblers, poppycock, horseradish.
I can't think of a silly swear now.
You jumped straight in with fuck.
Yeah, that is my go-to swear.
Is it? Is that your favourite swear word?
No, I think it's my go-to. Is it my... I think twat's my favourite.
Twat is a good one, yeah. I nearly said I like twat, but that's...
I know. Well, it's got this quite harsh sound to it.
Yeah.
But it's not as harsh as cunt.
Cunt is one I can't get. I can't say it. I just don't like that word. I know. I did, but I can't say it in a way, in a sweary way, in a way that I'm actually using it in the context of a swear word. I feel like it just doesn't. There's some people who it really suits, and I'm not one of them. I think being Scottish helps.
Maybe it doesn't form in my mouth very naturally, the word, but sometimes I do spit one out.
I find it hard to it's not a nice word to say, and not by which I mean it's an offensive word, although that is also true. I mean it's it doesn't feel good to say it. Fuck feels good to say it. It's got a nice plosive, that's a satisfying word.
Fuck. I was in a Google Meet earlier, and I put captions on. I've never tried the captions option before. and it was really good. Like, but it didn't like some of the swear words. It didn't like fuck or shit. It like does asterisks.
Oh, does it? That's clever.
Yeah, but what it allows is twat and bollocks.
Really? That's
Yeah,
interesting. I'd like to have been
yeah,
in that meeting in Google HQ where they were deciding which swear words they would asterisk out and which ones they'd keep.
yeah. I thought you were going to say you'd like to be in the meeting where it was me and Anne Marie like experimenting, and we just kept saying swear words for half an hour. Really,
That would also be fun. Yeah, just find a list of swear words from the mildest to the most extreme. See where the
yeah,
line is.
yeah.
We've been joined by my fat cat, which is very nice. This is her first appearance on the podcast.
Hi, fat cat.
You can just see her two legs here. I did just before lunchtime. I did a yoga class and was on camera for that. And she just, I mean, it shows how often I do yoga that the cat was absolutely like baffled by what the hell was going on. And the yoga class was like 45 minutes. And the whole time she was like pacing around me, sniffing me, headbutting me, like just absolutely beside herself with anxiety about why I was doing whatever it was she thought I was doing. And now here she is. So I think maybe she's just being a little bit like, she's just feeling sentimental today. I don't really know.
I mean, you said like she had this like anxiety. It's a good job you said that, because I was about to say, was she being a bit of a cunt?
I would never use that word to describe.
Neither would I. Neither would I.
Have you ever directed that word towards your dog?
No.
Exactly. But have you directed it towards your husband?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I call him twat quite a lot.
Yeah, but twat is like that's affectionate, isn't it?
I think it does. It feels affectionate. We say "dbat" to each other a lot, which means "don't be a twat." DB80.
Oh,
so
okay,
we
cool.
often say like, "Oh, just fucking dbat." So
I like it. I'm going to use that.
Dbat.
So, I mean, we could just talk about swear words for an hour. I mean, that would make for an entertaining podcast. But it would be good to talk about some stuff that's not swear words. Partly because, and in a way, you've only got yourself to blame for this, because when I was talking about potential future podcast guests, you suggested that I should get someone who is out and proud for Pride Month because it's June. And you are out and proud, as to the best of my knowledge. And
I'm certainly out, and I'm certainly a lot of the time proud. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so there you go. So it would be good to talk a little bit about that kind of stuff, as well as the kind of swear words. We don't have to do it instead of, we can do it as well as.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to get the conversation started, do you want to talk a little bit about, I think, so we had a conversation a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, in which you talked about your experience of after you had come out of not really being on board with the whole kind of pride movement at first, and it taking a while for you to kind of get your head around that. And I found that super interesting, and I wonder whether you might be up for telling us why that is.
Yeah, it will be interesting, because I don't know that I have talked about this an awful lot with many. I've said bits about it with people I know, but I don't think I've ever had like a full-on conversation about that journey to what kind of, I guess, what pride means, or what it used to mean to me in the context of kind of LGBTQ or queer pride, and also actually what the word means, pride. I think when you were saying like earlier about being out and proud, I was just having a little think of like, am I proud? Like sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not, and like what that really means. But my relationship with pride is really interesting. I actually actively used to hate it when I first came out. And not to like challenge you straight away, Tim, but like you said something about since I've been out or something. All I want to say really is coming out is a never-ending thing. It's there's not like a one moment if you come out and then the world suddenly knows you're gay. It's every time you meet someone new, coming out again, which is something that fills me with quite a bit of anxiety.
Still now?
Yeah, definitely. As when I'm about to share something or use the word husband or he, even a pronoun about my husband, or actively tell someone that I'm gay, like I get a tsunami of anxiety through my whole body that almost cripples me. And even if that's like I don't know, like in a taxi or with someone in a casual exchange that you're never going to see again. And, if it comes up in some kind of conversation, I get absolutely crippled for fear of what reaction I'm going to get, which is largely based off one really bad reaction I did get, but mostly I've had really nice reactions. I feel like I've really digressed from pride there.
No, that's okay. It's really interesting.
I'll circle back to that. But so in terms of pride, when I first came out, I was 16. I had known I was gay since I could remember. I can remember being like 4 or 5 and thinking, I quite like boys. And that being a thing. I don't know that actually in my head it was ever, I'm gay, but it was I'm different and there's something different about me. And I knew that for a long, long time. And then coming out at 16, felt like, I don't know, what did it feel? Lots and lots of different things. And I had to quickly form my views and opinions on gay life and gay world and pride and gay clubs and this and that, just everything. I had to quickly try and be part of some community that I'd never been exposed to before or been part of before. So I think I hated pride because it didn't feel like a safe thing for me to want to like or be a part of. So when I came out, I wanted to still seem like I was still the same person to people, so that I'd be, so I'd feel safe. So, I'm gay. And actually at first I did tell people I kind of liked girls a bit as well, but more boys. And that was also a version of trying to keep safe, which is totally unfair to bisexual people, and that happens, but that is what happened. And yeah, I guess I didn't want to associate myself with something like pride, where there were either stereotypical people or people that were wearing rainbow flags or being camp or effeminate or something that I didn't want to be associated with. This thing's going to be shoved in your face and here, deal with it. Yeah. So I really quickly distanced myself from anything like that and said, I don't think we should have gay clubs, that we should be able to go anywhere. We don't need gay pride. Why should I be proud of who I'm attracted to? It's very much the way I viewed it. And I used to say, well, there's not a straight pride, so why there's a gay pride? And people say that, and I really, I was going to say uneducated, ignorant people will say, no, well, there's not a straight pride, which incenses me now. But at the time, that's very much what I said. I don't know how much I actually believed any of what I was saying when I was 16.
Yeah.
But it was a safety net for me of please still look at me the same way. Yeah. Just because I'm attracted to boys. And actually now I think being gay isn't just me being attracted to the same sex at all. I think there's an awful lot to it in my identity. But yeah, so I distanced myself from it. And for years and years, and it's not probably until I hit my 30s that I really started to have a think about it and reflect. And that includes reflecting on a lot of parts of my life, I think, and my identity especially, and then what pride ended up kind of becoming or meaning to me. And like I said near the beginning, what that word actually means as well. And can I be a person that is proud of myself and start to associate with the community? And I really wish I'd engaged with the community much earlier on in my life. I feel like I missed out on a lot. Because the pride and safety it brings to be part of that community now, and things like chosen family and stuff like that it brings so much warmth and safety. And I spoke to someone recently about this, but like I remember a few years ago walking through London, and there was a football match on, and I walked past loads of bars, and there were like all these kind of guys cheering about the football and probably just having a really innocently good time, but it really intimidated me, and like
Yeah.
walking through on my own. And then I arrived at Pride in London, and I wasn't going to Pride, but I kind of walked through it, and I just started crying walking through it, because it all of a sudden felt part of something and safe, and here's like my tribe really, and here are my people, and I feel safe, and all these people together, and I'm not on my own. And like there's a lot in there around kind of representation and stuff. Look, as I guess as I'm talking out loud, I'm not quite sure where I'm heading with this conversational point. But like,
No, that's fine. I mean, you've said loads of really interesting things, which I want to ask you more about in that. One thing which you said, which I thought was really interesting, was that the 16-year-old you would say there isn't a straight pride, which is a line which we've all heard people say, or at least seen people say on Twitter. And generally that line is used by straight people to justify homophobia. And it's interesting that you were using that line as a gay person, possibly, and tell me if I'm psychoanalyzing you all wrong here, but possibly to justify a kind of internal homophobia that you still had at that time. Is that a fair thing to say, do you think?
it's absolutely fair, and something that I had and carried for a long, long time. Internal homophobia. I can still almost like taste or smell like sparks of that sometimes in myself, in my body, and sometimes think I can't think of like an example, but something will happen, or I'll hear something, and that will kind of flame really quickly in my body, that internal homophobia. It doesn't last very long.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost quite like an instinctive thing that just happens. But it's absolutely fair to say that, yeah. And I didn't want to associate myself with gay people or have any gay friends. I just wanted to carry on being me, who had friends and who people liked, and was terrified that people were not going to like me anymore. And not only actually not like me, I was always terrified, which is still what I think my anxiety is when I'm coming out. I was terrified that someone would beat me up or kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, that's so interesting. It's just making me think. I mean, so when I was 16, I was dealing with. Well, no, I wasn't dealing with. But I was homophobic as a 16-year-old, and that's because I was brought up in a religious culture, that told me that for two men to love each other is a sin, that there's something kind of inherently wrong with it. And I especially at that age, actually at 16, it was probably the peak of that for me. I surrounded myself with a Christian echo bubble where we just confirmed our ideas, not just about same-sex love, but about, creationism, about the afterlife, all of this kind of thing, that we had this kind of echo chamber where we, in potentially quite a self-congratulatory way, we were the chosen ones, we were God's children, that kind of thing, and everybody else on the outside was wrong or lost or damned, or whatever language we want to put on it. And that, growing up in that context, like I say, probably reaching its peak towards the tail end of my teenage years, meant that I had views and kind of emotional reactions to gay and lesbian people. I wasn't even thinking about transgender people and, the whole LGBTQ spectrum at the time. But let's say, just to begin with, gay and lesbian people, which were absolutely kind of homophobic. And it's interesting, obviously, so I've been on a journey with that, and I was like, I want to say I'm not homophobic anymore, but a part of me also kind of feels like, well, that's not for me to say. I can't say if I'm homophobic or not. Somebody, it's other people's experience which defines whether that's the case with me or not. But let's put it this way: I'm trying very hard not to be, and where I do see those knee-jerk tendencies within myself, I try to work with them. Anyway, I'm waffling away. What I wanted to get at was, for me, that homophobia, I can trace where it came from. I can say it's beginning to go to this church. partly it's a cultural thing, like, just when I was at school, being gay wasn't as accepted as it is now, but that was just really reinforced by the religious kind of language. And the question is, where did that come from with you? Because did you grow up with religion, or did it come from somewhere else?
So much to unpack. So like, thank you for sharing with me though, that like what you just shared about you being homophobic at that age, and like your journey with that. I think is probably, I don't know how you feel about this, not an easy thing to say, I wouldn't have thought. And I am interested in your phrase of like, I try my best not to be, or I try hard not to be homophobic. Now I'd be keen to unpack that a bit, but
We can do
maybe
that,
come back.
but you go first.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll come back to that. So I didn't grow up. I didn't grow up. I should just finish the sentence there. There wasn't a strong presence of like religion in our family, or not explicitly anyway. But I didn't grow up in a very warm, accepting environment or safe environment. So not feeling safe was quite an early experience. But then in terms of internal homophobia and where that kind of comes from, I think religion does have a part to play, as much as it wasn't an explicit part of like my life, and certainly have had lots and lots of messages from different people over years about, well, I guess like hijacking religion as a reason to direct homophobia at me or at the community. But there's like some quite existential stuff though as well in there. You know, when you are even in school, I couldn't go to a religious school or anything, but like we had religious education, we had RE, and we'd be taught about the creation as like being Adam and Eve being created. There's another thing I'd have got. It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. You know, that's the line people would say. So we exist because God created man and woman procreate and have, and that's like a party line, I guess, that I would have heard a lot. And in terms of like what that means internally for me, it would have been, okay, so people exist because of God. If God thinks people should just be straight, that's what he created, and that's what people will say. So if God thinks then being gay is a sin, because that's might be what's implied from that, then my existence is fundamentally wrong. And should be expunged or questioned or vanished or disappeared, or there's something wrong, there's something inherently wrong with me. And we'll hear phrases like traditional values quite a lot, and that very much is rooted in religion. You know, that very much, I think anyway. You know, and the other, as well as the Adam and Eve stuff, kind of other quotes I would have got from people are things like about don't, you know, laying with another man, I don't know. And all the things you hear are normally always about gay men and sex, really. It's not about identity or who you are, or it's about sodomy or, you know, the act of gay sex. There's a lot of focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something, sorry to cut across you, but reflecting on when I was growing up, especially when I was in that Christian bubble, absolutely, it was the image of two men which we were taught to find so offensive. And actually the image of two women didn't have the same visceral reaction. And I'm not 100% sure why that is. Maybe, does it come from the biblical language, which is quite patriarchal? You know, it talks about a man sleeping with another man, you know, that kind of thing. Does it come from something somewhere else? I don't really know. But you're absolutely right that I feel like if a lesbian woman had come into the church, people would have been, you know, logically, we believe that this is a sin, but it wouldn't have had the same visceral kind of reaction, I think, as a gay man. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's a universal thing, but that's certainly true of my
No,
experience.
I think it is. And I think there's something in there about. So I remember growing up to headlines and newspaper articles and things on TV about homosexuality being equated with paedophilia. And they're going to do something to us. They're going to get us, and they're going to get our kids, and they're going to turn people. And so I think it's like doing something to people. And I mean, the elephant in the room there is we're talking about penetration. That's like you're doing something to somebody.
Yeah.
And that, I'm not sure how much to say about this, but like so I've had an experience, at a workplace where somebody told me they hoped that their son wouldn't be gay because the idea of their son being penetrated disgusts them.
Wow. That's huge. That's such a massive, where is that coming from?
I've got like really horrible goosebumps even saying that out loud. Like it was a horrible. There was a lot more to it than that, but like there was a horrible exchange, and that was from a professional male in a working environment. It's so I think it's that kind of having something done. I think that's why it's gay men and not lesbian women that kind of. And I don't want to kind of invalidate any lesbian women's experiences of homophobia either in that, but I just that's my experience. So that internal homophobia, I think it just comes. There's a lot in there in that kind of should I exist? Is there something wrong to me? And you don't see. Well, I certainly didn't see growing up like queer representation. I didn't see me anywhere. There was no representation of me. So again, there must be something wrong with me then if I'm not anywhere. And representation isn't something, generally speaking, that straight people have to think about even, because you just see it. It's just everywhere, There's a relationship and that's the way it is. And as soon as you see a gay relationship in something, it's a big deal. And it's like, this is something different. And like that's getting better, but it's still. I remember. I don't know if it was the last Christmas or the one before, but I think there was an advert where there was some like gay couples on it, and it got like an outrageous reaction from people of like, it's just and so I think I'm going
the representation thing is really important. I think as a straight white Christian guy, I have never had to think about representation. Because I'm seen as like almost the default. Do you know what I mean? So there are people like me all over television as if we represent 99% of humanity. That's so I've never really had to think about it. And it's really interesting that in the past few years, there's been, say like with Disney movies and Marvel movies, there have been little, I must say, not very bold, but hints and nods towards representation. So there's a thing in Endgame with there's like the guy who talks about his husband who he misses and that kind of stuff. And with all of those, there's like, I mean, I spend more time than I care to admit on Reddit, and there's always this kind of fan reaction on Reddit of like, isn't it brilliant? And Marvel have finally got gay people in their movies or whatever. And it always kind of feels like, I mean, that little step is a little step in the right direction, but the reaction highlights how huge an issue it is. The fact that this tiny little, really nothingness of a hint solicits this kind of like, brilliant, isn't it great? Gay people are finally being represented.
Oh, it's bananas, man. It's like I was talking to someone about this yesterday, like just about queer representation, and saying, I'll tell you what queer representation is not, and it is not writing 7 Harry Potter books and then saying Dumbledore was gay, by the way. And it is not 2 women having a hug in the background of Star Wars. And it's not those things. That is not representation. That is, I mean, it's the mildest form of tokenism there can be. But it's not, maybe it's progress in small steps, but it's fucking insulting. Like we can bear to tolerate a hug in the background of a a huge movie. Yeah, it's man.
It's very
Um,
safe. It's not really challenging. Um, yeah,
no,
it's
because
like
you can have it both ways by doing that. You can
yeah,
say use both camps of people.
yeah,
You can say no, read the Harry Potter books. There's no gayness in them, and then you can appease the other, my lot,
yeah.
by saying, like, no, Dumbledore was gay. Look, well, which is it?
Well, I would just like to say, as somebody who grew up in the conservative evangelical church, we hated Harry Potter before there were gay characters in it because it had witchcraft in it. So we hated it before it was cool to hate it.
And not even in a homophobic way.
Yeah, exactly. When all that stuff happened, we were like, told you there was something wrong with him.
um, yeah, I guess just like circling back a little bit to where religion might fit into some to that again. Like I guess that word sin, where the word sin, the program that was on this year, It's a Sin, which was remarkable, and I absolutely loved it. But like, why is it called It's a Sin? Like, it's what's the sin there? And it's that going back to it's sodomy and it's gay males having sex is what it
Mm-hmm.
kind of comes down to. And um, look, I'm not saying there are no gay people who are religious, because there clearly are, and might embrace both kind of parts of themselves and identity. But I always thought, like, why would I invest in any kind of religion when religion wants me kind of wiped out? Was my experience.
I completely understand that, and it's a really so. I mean, yeah, obviously there are people who are gay and religious. I know some of them. Some of them are my friends. Some of them are my family. And it's a complicated thing, and it's something that I don't feel massively qualified to talk about somebody else's experience. So I'm not going to talk too much about their experience. But what I do know is that it's hugely complicated, and that there's even in the liberal end of religion, which is the place where I found myself for the past kind of 15 years or so, even there is institutional homophobia. It's on they might not be explicitly hateful. They don't necessarily even believe that there's anything wrong with it, but the institutional homophobia stuff is almost impossible to get away from, even in the kind of nice, we welcome everybody kind of churches. And I guess it's hard for me as a Christian, because I think what I believe in my core about my faith is that it's a message of love and compassion and equality and justice for all, for everyone, irrespective of gender, sexuality, skin color, whatever. And that's what I see when I read the Gospels and the story of Jesus. That's my experience of it. And Jesus never has anything to say about same-sex relationships. So there's that. But then there's the institution, which has grown over the past 2,000 years. And it's something we talk about often on the podcast, just about the different ways in which the institution, in growing like that, has moved further and further away from the point, from the core truth. And wherever Christianity, I'll just talk about Christianity rather than other religions, because I'm not qualified to talk about other religions, but wherever Christianity is used to alienate or exclude or create division, in my mind, we've missed the point. That you're doing the exact opposite of what our guy told us to do. That's so. Anyway, where I'm going with that is, I guess what I'm saying is, if I were gay, I would really struggle with the kind of what I believe about the core of my faith compared to my experience of the religion and the institution, which, like I say, on the one extreme is actively hateful, the Westboro Baptist extreme, and then on the other extreme is kind of nice, but in a way that still others, that still alienates, that still separates, and is still homophobic.
That kind of, still homophobic, but like quieter homophobia, feels like they'd still have placards, but they'd write it in invisible ink, that you're not welcome here. I'm just trying to own this experience as my own, like, now, but like, religion feels to me like a really scary place and a really scary thing to be feared. And I am in danger of being, well, I said wiped out, didn't I, a little while ago? Wiped out or hurt or something, by, and that's such a huge sweeping statement, just to say like religion in that way, because like obviously that encompasses so many different things and people and ideas and thoughts and beliefs. But that at the core of how I feel is what I feel. Based on like my experiences, my worst version of coming out when I like was my dad, and so sorry, I'm kind of I find myself getting into a really clunky, clumsy place when I start talking about this, because I get a bit scared and emotional. And so yeah, look, when I came out to my dad, I got a number of messages about it being wrong. I was something to be disappointed in, and not to tell my family. Don't tell the rest of the family, because we have Christian values. Specifically my grandparents. So don't tell people. Don't tell people your disappointment. Don't get AIDS.
Wow.
Well, that's another thing though. Like AIDS, like all this. God, I feel like I'm like attacking religion here, Tim. But like,
attack away. That's fine.
Well, it's not though. It's people hijacking it again. Like I said, people saying like AIDS is like a cure from God, to wipe out the gay community. And that, growing up, so how old would I? I'd been like 7 or 8, and they would have been the headlines on newspapers.
Yeah.
Like, knowing I'm different, knowing this thing about myself, and then you see, oh, this disease that is killing people is from God, and it's going to cure, or wipe us out, basically, not cure, but like, and then all the other things around that legislation at the time, like I couldn't have come out any earlier than 16, because it was illegal for anyone at school to be able to talk about being gay. Section 28, it was illegal. Couldn't have had any conversations. All those kind of traditional values again. And I don't know. Yeah, there's so many just bits and things to it. And even like I was talking to my husband yesterday about giving blood, and like finally, like gay men are now allowed to give blood if they're in a relationship. That's like now we're in 2021, and that's now a thing. Like, okay, so what was wrong with my blood before? What did it just contain sin? Is that what is wrong with my blood? It's
what I mean. Educate me a little bit. What was the given reason? Because presumably it wasn't that your blood is sinful when it came from the NHS. What was was there a given reason?
Yeah. I mean, it's bullshit, but yeah, it's, it's not bullshit in a way, but it is. There's the gay men involved in sexual relationships are more likely to have HIV, potentially.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Like they wouldn't be testing their blood they're giving to people. Anyway. So yeah, there's that. And then it's changed over the years, but you can give blood if you haven't had sex in the last 6 months.
Okay.
And so things are like, it's progressed gradually. But it's just another message of you're wrong. There's something wrong with you. Even your blood is wrong.
Yeah.
Your identity's wrong. Your blood's wrong. What you want to do is wrong. Sex is wrong. What you like is wrong. What you want to wear is wrong. The music you want to listen to is wrong. You're not going to see yourself in any films or on TV. Your identity, my identity, was wiped out before I could even understand it. And that is a hard place to crawl out of.
It's an awful place, and like I say, I can't imagine it as a, like I say, as a straight white Christian guy. My identity has never been an issue for anybody. I've never experienced that. So I guess, like, I mean, to be clear, I'm not going to try to come to religion's defense on this, because there isn't one. That would be trite to do. I think what would be more interesting and more important would be to ask you how you've got to where you are now, and how you have moved past those horrible toxic messages that you grew up with. I mean, I assume you still probably carry some of them with you, but where do you find peace with your identity, with who you are? How do you find peace with it, and love yourself?
Thanks for that question. That's a beautiful question, by the way. It's quite a hard one to answer as well, because I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I don't think there's a one moment of something. It's a process. The whole life, that whole. So I was 16 when I came out, so 26. So yeah, like over 20 years, 22 years ago, and over that time, starting to find things that I was proud of, and for a long time that came from like career and work, and always needing to progress, and I progressed really quickly actually in my career, and I am proud of that. I have no interest anymore in progressing in my career particularly. Like it's not something that anyway, that for a long time is where I pinned like achievement and something to be proud of. But that's not about my identity. It's a part of what I do, and I do love what I do. Mm-hmm. But finding some kind of like peace or acceptance, and more than acceptance, you said like loving myself, and I've been able to kind of get to that place. Some of it's about, so I'm in therapy every week. I've been through incredibly dark mental health times and places, and emotional health, and my darkest place being about 2 years ago. And in terms of being genuinely proud of who I am and my identity, and loving myself, has come in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And crawling out of the darkest place I've ever found myself in, because like there was a potential I wouldn't come out of that place alive, and I did. And not only that, then being able to find like thriving in life and joy in daily life and my relationships, and the people that I choose to have in my life that accept me for who I am and love me for who I am. And that includes myself, like loving me for who I am, and knowing who I'm not was really important to discover for me, and who I don't want to be. I mean, without kind of giving it away, I mentioned quite an important family member earlier, and someone who I don't want to be. And that was quite an important discovery for me. What are the things I'm proud about? And it used to come from work, and now it's about being able to love people, love myself, be compassionate, be kind, love my dog, love my husband, love our time together, love meeting new people. And you being a part of that, Tim, and we have not known each other for very long, but meeting you has been an absolute joy, and I get a lot of joy out of interacting with you, and other people in my life. So
that's very mutual, I should say, just for the record.
Thanks, Tim. I wasn't like fishing for that.
No, I know you weren't, but I did want to say it.
I appreciate that. So therapy's helped a lot, actually. My therapy, who I call my brain wizard, is amazing. And but outside of that. I keep saying about my husband Greg, and I wouldn't have been able to. I wouldn't be here without him. We've been together 21 years next month, and again, something I was saying to someone yesterday, not to kind of turn it back around to kind of negative stuff, but like you do get this message sometimes like, how long you been together? And I'll say how long we've been together. And sometimes people say, oh, in gay years, that must be like 100 years or something. Like, what's a gay year? Like,
yeah. Like your dogs.
yeah. Like what? And I think that comes from well, how could you be in a loyal monogamous relationship if you're gay? Like presumably you're promiscuous and wouldn't be with someone for that long. And so they're like, yeah. And I guess to spin that background, it's learning to not. I still hear those messages and I still get sparks of things I've internalized, but I know what's mine and what isn't now.
Yeah.
And like the shame I felt for so many years is not mine. It was given to me, and and I'm still in a process of giving that back. But it's not. I know what is mine and what isn't mine. I know where stuff does and doesn't belong. And those messages might come up, but it's not about me. That's not my shit.
Yeah.
That is your sorry shit over there, not yours, Tim. I'm kind of pointing somewhere else. But like,
well, I've been part of the sorry shit, so that's fair.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting. The answer that you've just given to that question actually really highlights the importance of pride and that whole thing, because everything that you've said has been about people and about relationships. And I think there's like this popular script which you see on like motivational Instagram posts and places like that, where people say, you know, just be yourself and who cares what anybody else thinks and that kind of stuff. Just like swim against the tide and that kind of thing, which I think is bullshit. And I think it's like bullshit of the highest order, because my deep belief, and I think the evidence supports this, is that our identity is created in community. And that can be a tragedy if the only community you have ever known is an abusive community, or a community that tells you that you're not valid. It becomes almost impossible to discover self-love and to discover a sense of worth and that kind of thing, because the people around you are responsible for creating you.
Yeah.
And what you've just described, I think, is going on a journey from being surrounded by people who told you that you weren't good enough, that you were broken or damaged or whatever, and have created a new community now, which includes your husband and, you know, your chosen family and the other people who you've mentioned, who validate you and support you and tell you that you are worthwhile. And like I say, that whole thing of just be yourself, as if yourself is something that exists in isolation, that you can like cherry pick and say, like, hold it in your hand and say, this is me, I think is really rubbish, because the reality is who I am is shaped by the people around me. And so with the pride thing, it's interesting, you know, because I have had that same thought that you talked about like, why is it that just because of who you fancy or what gender you fancy, you have to join up to this community, which has all sorts of stereotypes and like a subculture and that kind of stuff. Like maybe you don't like musical theatre. Clearly you do, because I'm talking to you and you've got posters wall to wall of musical theatre.
Plastered behind me, yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, that's not what it's about. It's about immersing yourself in a community that tell you that you're okay. And learning to believe that through community, rather than trying to muster up that belief by yourself, which I think is almost impossible.
But embracing those, so the musical theatre thing is an interesting thing. Like embracing that as something I love. I was going to say it's quite recent. It's not. Like I've always loved musical theatre, but like being able to talk about it and say to people I love it. And there's a number of aspects of that relating to sexual identity that aren't about sex and the person that you are attracted to. Like for me, being gay, yes, I've got a husband, but also I love musical theatre, and sometimes I'll go into shops and get some clothes from the women's section because I'll prefer women's, whatever that means, a woman's cardigan, but like from that section of the shop. And I love the Spice Girls very much, and I love a lot of like cheesy 90s pop music, whilst also liking other things. And there's so many elements to like who I am that form part of that, and they're all part of me being gay. They're not. That's the being gay bit isn't just who I'm attracted to. It's all of that, and being able to embrace all of that and be proud of it and love it and enjoy it. And yeah, I do. I'm looking at some of my musical theatre posters in the camera now, just behind me, just because they give me so much joy. And again, representation in musical theatre for me as well, and seeing whether it's a character in a musical, seeing yourself, but also a lot of the performers as well. And it's a area of life where you do see a lot of representation, and sometimes you don't. Yeah, we often talk about representation in terms of films and pop culture, but we don't often talk about it in terms of your everyday life and who serves you at the shop or the pub or people in your workplace. And do you see yourself everywhere, or not? Yeah, I was actively banned from coming out at one workplace.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I worked there now because I'd handle it very differently now than I did then. This wasn't that long ago, actually. It was before I'm in the job I'm in now. But that I worked with a lot of young people who were talking about sexuality and gender, and a lot of them were saying like, if only we knew like an adult who was gay and like that we could talk to, and I spoke to my manager and said like, I'd really like to come out. Not that I needed to even do that, but like I'd really like to come out and just be like authentic about who I am. No, you need to be a blank canvas for these young people, but not if you're straight and married. You don't need to be a canvas. That you're allowed to come out as straight and being in a married relationship or have a girlfriend. But if you're gay, you have to be a blank canvas.
Well, that relates exactly to what I was saying about representation earlier on, which is I think people see straight, cisgender, white, male as that is the blank canvas. That's the default. That's the like that's treated as kind of like, what does the basic human being look like? Like me, basically. And then, okay, let's add a sexuality layer to this, or let's add an ethnicity layer to this, or a gender layer to this, or whatever else it is. That the way in which those things are talked about is they're like, these are little quirks that have changed the blank canvas, but the blank canvas is straight, white, male, maybe even Christian. I don't know. Let's say agnostic, maybe. And it's really messed up.
Well, yeah, I think that's what I was being told. Not be a blank canvas, but be a straight white male.
Yeah,
that's what the kids need you to be.
Yeah.
No, that's what you need me to be.
Yeah.
Mr. Straight White Male. Yeah.
And it's funny. So before this job, I was working in for doing youth work in East London, and I am like, I spent 3 years in private school. I've been to university 3 times. My parents are quite posh, and I talk in a way that's probably on the posh end of the spectrum, put it that way. And what I really quickly learned working in East London with young people was that the worst thing I could do is be anything other than who I am. To try to downplay my identity would have really actually damaged my relationship with them, even though my identity with a lot of them was very different to their upbringing. A lot of those kids were brought up in without as much money as I grew up in, from ethnic minority backgrounds, whatever it is, just have very different stories to tell than mine. But for me to try to be like them would have felt so disingenuous, and they would have seen straight through it. And I think that's the same as someone telling you that you need to behave like a straight man, because that isn't who you are. And for you to hide who you are will have damaged your relationship with the young people rather than helped it, I think.
Yeah.
Even if the young people couldn't relate at all to your experience, but just you being you is more important than you being like them.
Yeah, the reality of what that did was they noticed that I was different because I wouldn't say I was married. They knew I was in a relationship, but I can't tell you what that is. So then you just become this different thing that's hiding something. So I
Yeah.
never lied to them, and I said that, like, I'm never going to lie, but
Yeah.
I will, like, find a way of not saying the thing you're not letting me say.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was bad, 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 bad. And like I said, I'd handle that very differently now. Yeah, but trying to sit in like a different skin that's not yours, it's yeah,
Yeah.
actively can be quite damaging to everyone. Yeah, it's yeah.
Do you want to conscious you said something earlier on that we said we'd cycle back to. You were
Yeah,
interested by me saying I try not to be homophobic.
yeah.
What what
I'm.
what did you find interesting about that?
It's a really interesting phrase or sentence, or like, I try hard not to be homophobic.
Mm,
I guess what I'm curious about is, what are you actively trying not to do?
yeah.
And is that a behavior, or is that a, I'm trying not to have a belief or a thought or a feeling that I'm having?
Mm.
And yeah, what does trying hard not to be homophobic feel and look like? I'm really curious.
I think so. It's a thing that I have struggled to express, not just in terms of um, homophobia, but in terms of any kind of identity kind of thing. Anything like I would really struggle to call myself an ally, even though that's what I want to be. I want to be an ally. But for me to say I'm an ally, I feel like it's not for me to say whether I'm an ally or not, because maybe I'm not. Maybe there's all sorts of subconscious ways in which homophobia is manifesting itself in the things that I say or do, which I'm not even aware of.
Mm,
And so it's not, when I say I'm trying not to be homophobic, it's not that, so to be clear, I have no issue. I have no, like, there isn't any part of me left that thinks that there's something sinful or wrong about being gay. That I'm completely relaxed. Like, I can say that with confidence that I do not hold those same homophobic beliefs that I did when I was 16.
yeah.
Um, but am I free from prejudice? No, of course I'm not. And I don't think you are, and I don't think anybody is. Um,
Right.
and I think there's something like when you've got um, what's his name, Nick Clegg, wearing a T-shirt that says "This is what a feminist looks like." I want to say, have you really thought about that? Have you looked back over your whole life? Can you be really confident that you have been an ally to the feminist movement in your politics, in your public proclamations, in the things that you've expressed subconsciously without even realizing that you're expressing them? It feels too easy. It feels too easy for an affluent, successful white man to say, I'm a feminist, by the way. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I mean when I say, like, I'm trying to not be homophobic, because I I don't think it is for me to say whether I am homophobic or not. What I can say is I don't believe that there's anything wrong with being gay. And where I do have subconscious prejudices that emerge, which does happen from time to time, I do my best to not believe them and to think and to educate myself and to learn and to move past them. And I've had to go on a journey, for example, more recently with conversations about kind of transgender issues, that there was prejudice in me around that. Um, and I have spent some time trying to educate myself, trying to listen to transgender voices, spending time where I can, whether that's digitally on YouTube or whatever, or in person with people who've experienced being transgender, so that I can learn it, so that I can combat my prejudices rather than simply accepting and believing them.
So,
Um,
so
Go
that,
on, sorry.
to me, though, just feels more like I'm trying to understand, learn, educate. I'm trying to, like, understand more and integrate that into my, like, belief system. Then I'm trying hard not to be something. It
Yeah,
sounds like I'm trying more to be something than not be something.
yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that's probably what I'm trying to do, and maybe that didn't come across in what I said, but it's just like I say. I just think there's something a little bit too easy about somebody who's never struggled with identity issues
Mm,
to publicly proclaim, I'm an ally and above reproach when it comes to this.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and I want to be careful about that, because I think that probably doesn't help the conversation because it paints everybody as extremes. You're either a fascist or you're a saint. Do you know what I mean? Like, and there is no middle ground. And I don't think I'm either of those things. I think I
I'm
am.
glad to hear that.
Good. So I guess I'm trying to move towards the saint end of the spectrum in terms of equality and diversity and not, and prejudice, I guess. But for me to pretend that I don't have a little fascist within me doesn't really help, because it just means other people end up repressing their own thoughts and no one ends up getting educated. It just creates two extremes, no one learns.
You so quickly conjured up a beautiful image of a little Tim fascist inside you, then just it was lovely.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know what he looks like, but every now and again he raises his head.
There's my little fascist. I'm trying hard not to be him.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, we joke, but that's quite a good way, I think, of thinking about that. When voices of prejudice emerge within us, to be able to, with a bit of affection, to say, that's my little fascist, is actually probably not all that unhealthy compared to denying that voice exists. I think that's much more harmful.
The more you've spoken about that, the more I can kind of, it resonates a bit, I think, just in terms of my like kind of latent or whatever, like internal homophobia, like that can still spark up. And it's not like I try not to be it, but I quickly become like aware of it, what it is, where it belongs, who it belongs to. And I have to do like a bit of mental and emotional gymnastics to kind of navigate my way around that and understand it. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, like that kind of, I've noticed this thought or this feeling or this belief that I either used to have or I've been reminded of or I've got a bit of now. That's not me now. It's not who I want to be. So I'm going to educate myself about this other thing.
Exactly. And coupled with that is the thing that there are ways in which I am not even aware of those prejudices in myself. And it's possible, and I hope and pray that this isn't the case, but it is possible that at some point in my life, someone will have experienced me as being homophobic or sexist or racist. And never in a way, I can say with confidence, never in a way that I'm being aggressive, attacking, whatever. But that a turn of phrase that I used, which I wasn't educated about, was experienced in a way that was hurtful by somebody, or a question which I asked. I mean, the obvious things are, it's become a kind of a thing that people talk about when Black people experience white people's fascination with their hair, and those white people aren't thinking of themselves as racist, but actually the experience of a white person being fascinated with your hair feels like it's a race fueled, separating, divisive thing. And I don't want to pretend that I'm completely innocent of any of that. Do you know what I mean?
No, it sounds like you put a lot into that. I was just thinking of that kind of, the fascination with the hair thing. Like there's an almost like gay equivalent of that where people might ask you like, so who's the top and who's the bottom? Who's the woman? Who's the man? And you're just like, how can you ask me that? Like how, like, I'm not going to ask you about your like sex life with your husband, wife, do you know what I mean? Like, and like we're in a same-sex relationship. No one's the woman. Like we are two men in a relationship. It's fascinating the stuff that kind of happens around that. Thank you for sharing all that. Like that's it's helpful because like the thing you'd initially said about I try hard not to be homophobic. I'm not sure that's what you mean.
I can hear what you're saying. It sounds like I'm saying that there's a part of me that wants to persecute gay people, and that I'm trying my best to put the reins on it. That isn't what I meant, to be clear. That's not it. I actually, when you were just talking about that, I thought of an example. I guess maybe a couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody who is transgender, was born into a male body, but is moving towards that becoming a female body. And again, I'm cautious of the language that I'm using here and aware that some of it might be slightly wrong. And I was trying in our conversation to show that I'm supportive and that I care and that I'm interested, and I'm not here to say you're right or wrong or whatever. And in our conversation, I asked, like, do you think, like, will you have the surgery? Will you do that? And that person's response was, I actually wish you didn't ask me that, because it others me, it separates me. And it's a bit like me asking you about your sex life or what's going on under your pants or whatever. Like it's not an okay question. And this is where the kind of trying hard thing comes in, that my response to that was, fuck, I didn't know. That's a really good point, and I've learned my lesson, and I won't ask a transgender person that again. But for me to then go on a podcast and say, I am a transgender ally, to that person could have felt quite distasteful, because they'd be like, actually, I've experienced this with Tim, and what he asked wasn't okay. Even though we're all cool now. It's all good. Like that situation was dealt with very rapidly, and we're friends, and it was a learning moment.
I can understand that thing. I can understand and empathize with some of that as well. And I don't know, maybe some more exploration of what like an ally is really, I guess, because for me, like I'll still stumble over language around different things. Maybe it's trans language or language about race or even religion as well. Like, I don't know, like I don't know all of the language that I should be using all of the time with different people, and different people have different experiences of different language. And I think it's better to have the conversation in a potentially clumsy way and learn than not have the conversation.
I agree.
So yeah, I can stumble over language a bit when I'm not quite confident on what I should or shouldn't be saying. Which is because I was going to ask you earlier, like, what you think about the word queer, because again, like it's a word that for a long, long time was not to be used by anybody, and like our communities reclaimed that word. And I guess I'm intrigued from a white straight man, as we've said a number of times, like what your perspective on that, or would you ever use that word?
So it's a word, as a rule, that I wouldn't be offended by you using it, or anybody, from like the whole LGBTQ spectrum using it. But it's almost like the N word, in the sense that I kind of feel like that's a word that was used to oppress. And for me to use it would be oppressive, even if I didn't mean it to be oppressive. But for you to use it is fine. That said, there is, my kind of area of study is theology, and philosophy and that kind of stuff. And there's a whole subsection of, there's queer theology and queer philosophy, which is amazing. And like, the language there is really powerful, and it's a really creative way of exploring religion and belief in God and that kind of stuff, in a way which doesn't just accept homosexuality, as a kind of like, well, it's here, so we might as well accept it. But like, this is who God created me to be, and this is God's gift to humanity is the LGBTQ plus spectrum, that this is not just a blip, but an amazing thing to be celebrated and grateful for. And so in that, in my doctorate, I probably used the word queer a couple of times in reference to queer theology, but just because that's what it's called. Like, I don't know, I guess I could call it Q word theology, but that just hasn't really happened. So that's a long way of saying mixed feelings. I wouldn't use it in any other context apart from as a label to define a kind of philosophical movement.
Okay. You're not going to like do the intro to the podcast and say, we've got this queer person on, Dan. You're not going to do that.
No. I'll use much more offensive language than that.
That reclaiming the word's really interesting, though, isn't it? Because, like, even when I was saying about like being different and wrong earlier, that's what queer kind of came from. Like it's weird
Yeah.
and strange and different, and then like to be able to reclaim that and have it mean something completely different feels like quite a freeing and powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, definitely. And history's full of that, I think, of like persecute. Actually, even this feels almost tasteless to say, but it's the truth. Christian, that word originally was went before Christianity became the dominant world religion, when we were just a little tiny huddled group of anxious people not really sure where we belonged in the world.
Yeah.
We were called Christians by people in a derisive way. It means kind of like little baby Christs, like little Jesus boys, like, and it's a word that we took on and now defines this huge, massive, powerful, all-consuming thing. But initially, it was a persecuted group of people using a word that had been like reclaiming it.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Well, and it happens everywhere, right? Like with whether it's race or like slut walks, that
Yeah.
whole thing. Just using a word that has been used to hurt people to kind of to own it and to take power from it. It's happened throughout history. I think it's really cool. It's really powerful.
It's interesting the word when you say the word Christian, because it's always used to be like, what's your Christian name? What's your Christian name?
Yeah.
Rather than like first name, whatever. But when you say the word Christian, I don't initially think religion or Christianity. I think of a character from Moulin Rouge. That's what comes to my head when I hear the word Christian.
Is it now? So I'm not as well versed in musical theatre as you are. Is it a character that is a good character or a bad character?
He's the main character. So Ewan McGregor in the movie.
Oh, amazing. Cool. Well, yeah, carry on associating it with that then. That works for everyone.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool, man. Well, I've kept you for more than the hour I said I would keep you for. So, just to say, I mean, thanks so much for talking in such an honest and real way. I found it really powerful listening to you, and I'm sure that the people who are listening will have the same experience. So thanks for making the time and for being such a good podcast guest and such a good friend. I'm grateful to have you in my life.
Thank you. So you're very welcome, and thanks for, I guess, like creating a safe space where I've been able to just talk honestly and share that. So thank you, and right back at you. Thank you.
I'm back. Still in the same little bit of land, but walking counterclockwise rather than clockwise around the circle this time. So wasn't that great? Isn't Dan great? I like I say, I just think it's such a great, powerful, important conversation. Dan has taught me a lot, not just through this conversation, but through his friendship in this past year. I've learned a lot about him and about myself through our friendship, and I'm enormously grateful for him. And even though leaving my current job to go off and start my new one is something I'm excited about and have no doubt about in terms of it being the right decision for me, there is some sadness there because I won't get to speak to Dan quite as often as I do now, and I'll miss that. So Dan, if you've watched this and you're still here, thanks for everything, man. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your support. And thanks for this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to finding some time to coming and seeing you in Nottingham when we can do that, which will be soon. Cool. All right, that's about it. Last month in this little end bit, I told you that I was working on a bigger name to come and be a guest on the podcast. That's still in the pipelines. The person who I'm speaking to, who has, a pretty significant following, and I'm really excited about getting them on if it works out. They're busy moving at the moment, so their life is stressful enough without me badgering them for dates and that kind of stuff. But we've been emailing back and forth, and I'm hoping we can get that recorded maybe next month, in time for the August episode of the podcast. But if not, we'll keep working on it. And if it doesn't happen for next month, I will have somebody else interesting and thoughtful and entertaining. Cool. All right. That's everything, I think. Thanks for listening. and I'll catch you on the next one. Farewell.